Good morning, colleagues, and welcome to the second day of our time together. My name is David Locke. I'm Secretary General of the Magna Carta Observatory, and it's my pleasure to guide you through the first part of this morning. The purpose of this celebration and conference is for academics to look at the Bologna process and its fundamental values, and to look beyond 2020. And the learning from this event will be fed into the ministerial summit in Rome in June 2021. Now, to help us with that, we have with us this morning Helmi Andersson from Finland, who is sitting in the front row. She's from the National Union for University Students in Finland, and she will be our rapporteur. Welcome and thank you. This morning, the conference as a whole has been split into 5 themes. Ours is academic and related civic values in changing societies. We have 2 speakers, and then we will have just short of 30 minutes together to have questions and answers and discussion. Our first speaker will be Liviu Matei, who is Provost of the Central European University and is Professor of Higher Education Policy at the School of Public Policy. He's conducted assignments, research projects for the World Bank, UNESCO, Council of Europe, and the European Commission, and we were delighted to have him as one of our speakers at the Observatory's 2017 anniversary in Hungary. Our second speaker will be Janica Sponaugle, Research Associate at the Global Policy Institute in Berlin. Janica has some very interesting research interests and is currently working on the development of a new methodology to measure academic freedoms across the world. We welcome both of them, and Liviu, I invite you to speak first.
Good morning. Thank you very much, David, for the introduction and for the invitation. It is an honor for me to address this anniversary conference of the Bologna process, and even more so because we are gathering at the Alma Mater Studiorum Università di Bologna, the oldest and one of the most influential of all European universities. Università di Bologna was not only a forerunner and model for the European universities during the past centuries, but also in some sense, I will say, a model for the European common space for higher education, for the Bologna process itself, and the European higher education area as we know them today. This will be the first topic of my talk, and I will address it only briefly. For my second topic, I will take a few moments perhaps only, to mention not only the achievements of the Bologna process, and I should say there are important achievements and there are reasons for celebrations today, but I would also like to mention something about the people who made them possible, because in higher education, or rather in higher education policy, we tend to concentrate on concepts, processes, models, trends and principles, aggregate data and outcomes, and forgot about the people, individuals whose lives are dedicated to higher education, who help move this sector forward, sometimes indeed in amazing ways. We also tend to forget about the many personal tragedies that developments in and around higher education can generate. Finally, I will dedicate most of my talk to what I consider to be the most serious failure of the Bologna process. For this, the subtitle of my talk could very well be "The Crisis of Academic Freedom in Europe." Because, let it be said clearly, we are in the middle of a crisis of academic freedom in Europe, in the European higher education area. But first, what do I mean when I say that Università di Bologna served as a model, perhaps, for the European higher education area? Let me illustrate only briefly with the case of the establishment of my own university, Central European University, CEU, in 1991, very recently. When CEU was being conceived as an international university dedicated to the entire Central and Eastern Europe, around the time of the fall of the Berlin Wall between 89 and 91, by Central European intellectuals and former dissidents like Václav Havel, everybody knows who he was, Bronislaw Geremek, who was one of the leaders of the Solidarity movement and later on Foreign Minister of Poland, or Arpad Gönc, a leader of the 56th anti-communist revolution in Hungary and the first democratically elected president of Hungary. They advocated explicitly for a new university, which became CEU, that would take the old medieval University of Bologna as its model. It's quite interesting. They represented the original Bologna University as a multinational, multi-ethnic school where the students coming mostly from the countries of Southern and Eastern Europe studied together. They had a common language, not only in the sense that they all understood Latin, but also in the sense that they could understand each other because they had a common framework of reference intellectually and morally. With the adoption of the Bologna Declaration in 1999, these ideals, intra-European mobility, developing common learning models, and the common space for dialogue, were put on the much broader European agenda. So you would understand why I say that it is an honor to be at the Università di Bologna today, given all that it represents for the European higher education in the past and at present. But let me move to my second section about the achievements of the Bologna process and who made them possible. Whatever the shortcomings of this process, we have a lot to celebrate. The most important achievement for me is the creation of a common European space for dialogue and action in higher education. This is unprecedented in history. It is relevant for Europe and it is relevant for the world. The magnitude of transformations made possible by the Bologna process is spectacular. Many well-known organizations, some represented in the room today, but also anonymous individuals, academics, administrators, policymakers, and students have made a contribution to the vast changes of the last 20 years in the European higher education. These are the people I personally like to call the Bologna soldiers. I am one of them myself. 2019 should be their celebration. But history is ungrateful, not only with the foot soldiers in higher education, who remain always anonymous, but also with the leaders and groundbreakers, who most often remain anonymous as well. We rarely know where major initiatives which have changed the face of higher education, if not the world, originate. Who had the idea of the GI Bill in the US in 1944, which opened the door to the massification of higher education? Who exactly in 1999-2000 had the idea of a European strategy for the knowledge society and as part of this of a European research area? Who invented the Erasmus program, one of the most remarkable episodes in the history of higher education worldwide? Very few know, and no particular individual gets recognition for it. It is not publicly known who exactly had the idea of a Bologna process altogether, let alone of its many important discrete initiatives. So as a Bologna soldier myself, as someone who has lived or lived through this process from the very beginning as a teacher, university and ministry administrator, as a higher education researcher, I got to know directly many individuals, some of them in the audience today, who have made major contribution to the Bologna process, to the advancement of higher education in Europe more general. They are not soldiers, but generals and marshals of the Bologna process, and they deserve recognition for that. I am not going to make the mistake of naming any single one. Specifically, I made that a week ago. I'm not going to repeat it, but rather, I'll move to my third topic about university autonomy, or rather academic freedom. University autonomy and academic freedom are matters of global relevance. They are global challenges today. As fundamental values of higher education, they have a lot in common everywhere. They are also universal values. And yet, as policy concepts and practical facets of university governance, they tend to and need to acquire specificities that have to do with definite individual context. Regional, cultural, and intellectual traditions, regional policy, and regulatory frameworks, for example, create specific dynamics in academic freedom and university autonomy. It is with this observation in mind that at this conference, very fittingly dedicated to the Bologna process going global, I would like to argue that we in Europe, or the European higher education area, are facing a crisis of academic freedom presently, and that we have to take ownership of this crisis. The situation of academic freedom is in many respects different in Europe from that of other regions of the planet, which are not without challenges either. The US is to a significant extent different in this regard from Europe, and Europe is different from Southeast Asia or Australia. There is also significant variation within Europe itself, in particular national differences, having to do again with traditions, legislations, but also with the nature of the current political regimes in each of them. And yet, in spite of these differences, there is something that is common to Europe, specifically European. A European dimension predates the Bologna process. It goes back to the medieval times and the Università di Bologna of those times. But it has augmented and has been made into a defining characteristic of our work in higher education like never before by the emergence of the European higher education area. So why talk about the crisis of academic freedom in Europe? And after having just cited reasons for celebration and some great, even breathtaking achievement, is this justified? What is the nature of the crisis anyway, if there was one? Is there a way out? If yes, is this way out a European one? Is there a European solution to a European crisis? Alternatively, should any solution to the crisis of academic freedom in Europe be based instead on a global, universal perspective, or perhaps at the other extreme, rather on national efforts and regulations? I would like to propose there are two main dimensions of the crisis of academic freedom in Europe. One is intellectual in nature, or perhaps I could call it conceptual. By this, I mean that we lack a clear conceptual articulation of academic freedom in Europe, one that would have academic, legal, regulatory, or policy relevance. We do have a European higher education area, but no reference in it for academic freedom. This creates European-wide, national, and also institutional challenges. It creates, or just doesn't help to prevent personal tragedies, to bring in the individual once again. The second dimension of the crisis is empiric, down to earth. Academic freedom is under attack in many European countries, including in the European Union. It is challenged, even threatened. This is a recent development. It is in part the result of a changing political climate with new ideologies and public policy narratives that undervalue liberty and freedoms more generally, including the freedom of science and advanced education. A new political epistemology is spreading in Europe. In the thinking and action of powerful political forces in the last few years have marked the corrosion of the centrality of policy concepts supportive of university autonomy and academic freedom, such as knowledge society, democratization, Europeanization, or social inclusion. In this time of democratic recession in Europe, this new political epistemology is not supportive of higher education in general and may simply not tolerate academic freedom. The most severe situation in the European Union is in Hungary, where I am coming from. In 2010, already, the Hungarian constitution was amended, the principle of academic freedom was abolished and substituted with the principle of government control. My own institution, Central European University, has been subject to repeated attacks from the government, mainly since 2017. We will be forced to go in exile to another country from September next year. I was not here yesterday because we had our last commencement ceremony in Budapest. This too is an unprecedented, unexpected, and unbelievable development in an EU member state in the 21st century. It is a brutal example of infringement of academic freedom in Europe. This case also shows that academic freedom is not only a conceptual construct or an abstract value. Its infringements affect the lives of thousands of individuals, not only students, academics, and staff, but also their families, children, spouses, or elderly parents. When CEU moves out of Budapest and out of Hungary, a few thousand people will have to leave their homes and find new ones in a different country. Their children will have to leave their playground and schools and find new ones in a different country in a different language. For those who have elderly or ailing parents, the concern is who will take care of them. How can they continue to take care of them once they move out of the country? This is not mobility, but forced movement of population, ordinary people and citizens by the thousands, happening in a EU member state in the 21st century. The other Hungarian universities, while remaining open for business in Hungary, are subject to a degree of close political and administrative control from the government that is reminiscent of the totalitarian regimes of the 20th century. More recently, the government decided to take control over and eventually disband the network of research institutes of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, the most prestigious research institution in Hungary with a history of excellence and relevance extending over 150 years. A few days ago, an entire research in the hard sciences of the Hungarian Academy, all Hungarian researchers, announced that they too have to leave the country. The president of the Academy, a world-famous mathematician, winner of the Wolf, Knuth, and Kyoto prizes, bemoaned in a public address a couple of weeks ago that, unlike CEU, his institution cannot move to the neighboring Austria, and all its research capacity and output will be simply destroyed by the government. How can I take the Hungarian Academy to Austria? He asked. There are many important cases of infringement of academic freedom in Europe. This is not a Hungarian disease. Some such cases are well known, others less so, some quite extreme, others rather insidious. The severe restrictions, even repression of academic freedom in Turkey are public knowledge. The government of Mr. Erdogan has closed down entire institutions, fired faculty and staff, and sent academics and students to jail by the thousands in the wake of the coup of 2016. Turkey is not a member of the EU, true, but it is a European country and an important member of the European higher education area. Of course, the situation is not identical or equally bad in all EU or European higher education area countries, but there are worrying signs elsewhere too, including in Western Europe. There were cases reported in Germany, including at least one court case recently about AfD sympathizers and politicians attacking, threatening, or trying to intimidate German academics for views expressed in their research and teaching. Protection of academic freedom remains strong in Germany, but imagine how this would change should a political force like AfD get the power to review and change the legislation or regulatory framework in the country. No wonder academics and students in Germany are worried. In 2017, a member of the UK Parliament representing the main governing party by the name of Chris Heaton-Harris sent a letter to all vice-chancellors asking that they submit without delay to his office the names of any academics who teach European affairs-related subject, Brexit in particular. He also asked for all teaching materials, paper-based or online, used by these academics to be sent to him personally. Of course, the UK being the UK, a country with a strong tradition of academic freedom, the vice-chancellors refused to comply and sent that MP to hell instead. The incident, however, which is not even singular, remains a significant attempt at intimidation and restriction of academic freedom. It generated a lot of emotion in the UK and raised questions about how something like this could happen in a country reputed among the most democratic in the world. At a European conference I attended 2 years ago, a respected higher education policymaker from another Western European countries, and I will not mention the name because I was told this is not official position of the ministry of that country, it is a Western European country, he stated openly that academic freedom is a concept of the past, a privilege for a small elite, and therefore in no need to be protected or perpetuated. He further said that we should simply stop talking about academic freedom, which is not a value or principle that makes any sense today. Just forget it and move forward. It is my understanding that even here in Italy, at the Alma Mater Studiorum, just recently an Italian politician tried to impose that a particular book based on research on La Liga di Salvini, he asked that this text be removed from the list of readings for a particular course in this university. This too is an attempt at restricting academic freedom. Gender studies degrees are banned through national or university-level administrative measures in at least 2 European higher education area countries, one of which is a member of the European Union. In Europe, we have developed a model of university autonomy embedded in the EUA autonomy scorecard that is highly influential on our continent and worldwide. This model can even be considered as another achievement of the Bologna process. This model, however, a model of institutional autonomy, does not mention academic freedom at all, and there is no similar model for academic freedom in Europe. This is another illustration of the crisis of academic freedom in Europe. I could mention many other examples. I don't have the complete list. No one has. But these examples are not isolated, not exactly random either. They are worrying because they belong to a trend. They are symptoms of a deeper illness. Moreover, I think I should say, in the European higher education area, they happen only in some places, or rather in some places. But in academic freedom, an attack on one should be considered as an attack on all. And what happens to us in Turkey or Hungary may happen to you elsewhere in Europe. This is why we should take ownership of the crisis of academic freedom in Europe. This is why we need to address it. Now, do this example, however, really support the assertion about the existence of a crisis of academic freedom in Europe? Some people would disagree. A German researcher of academic freedom argued recently, not using these exact words, that there is no crisis of academic freedom in Europe, that trends are rather positive. In any case, she maintained, we cannot know if there are systematic and terrible infringement of academic freedom because we don't really know what academic freedom is. We don't have a definition of it, and there is no system in place to measure or monitor academic freedom worldwide. This list of recent incidents involving infringement of academic freedom is, I believe, sufficient to make us worry. In fact, it does prove the point about a real-life crisis of academic freedom. This crisis has as its main source the changing political epistemologies, public policy, and political narrative. That is, a source that is outside of the higher education system itself. But it is equally important to note that the crisis of academic freedom in Europe is also the result of internal evolutions within the sector itself and also specifically within the Bologna process. We have witnessed unprecedented developments in higher education in Europe since the signing of the Sorbonne and Bologna declarations in 1998 and 1999. Apart from its continental-wide political geography, the European higher education area has also brought about exceptional developments in the organization and substance of higher education, a new structure of degrees, the emergence of European models of master's and doctoral education, the emergence of a European model of quality assurance, new principles and tools in higher education policy and management, even some new developments in higher education pedagogy, not to mention the unprecedented level of student mobility and exchange. A work in progress, the European higher education area is a fascinating story of exceptional ambitions articulated at the national and continental scale. It is a story of many failures, but also of extraordinary achievements. Unfortunately, academic freedom cannot be counted among the achievements. It has been systematically neglected in the Bologna process until recently. For almost 20 years, we have taken academic freedom for granted. Save for a few brave but isolated attempts, we have not even talked much about it, let alone make it a core part of the intellectual and policy reflection in higher education. Academic freedom is an underdeveloped and undervalued concept in the European higher education area. There is no European definition, conceptual reference, or model for academic freedom. This makes it difficult to monitor it, to develop and promote or evaluate policies and practices for which academic freedom is or should be relevant. Let me illustrate with one last example. To its credit, the European Commission tried to address the worrying evolutions in Hungary. The Commission sued Hungary over the infamous Lex EU of 2017. In the original submission to the European Court of Justice, a direct allegation of infringement of academic freedom was made. The Hungarian government countered immediately, contesting the existence of a European legal ground to make the case for academic freedom. As a consequence, and implicitly acknowledging that there is no clear, actual, or useful European reference, the Commission changed the head of charge. When the first hearing in this case took place just yesterday in Luxembourg, 2 years after the adoption of the law, the case was nominally only about the right of establishment and delivery of commercial services, not about academic freedom. The grim situation that I'm describing in Europe has, however, a silver lining, like any crisis has. Last year, the ministers responsible for higher education of the European higher education area countries agreed to bring university autonomy, academic freedom, and integrity to the forefront of the Bologna policy dialogue for the first time. A sentence to this effect was inscribed in the Paris ministerial communiqué. This is a potentially major breakthrough. Subsequently, an expert group was appointed, tasked with developing an initial proposal for a European reference of academic freedom to be considered soon by the minister, perhaps already next year in Rome, along with possible mechanisms for monitoring and protection. Several people who are in the room today are members of this group, which is reassuring. It seems that the work has started seriously to find a European solution to the European crisis of academic freedom. Of course, this work is not done yet, and as in the case of other worthy Bologna initiatives, it may lead to a dead end. I am confident this will not be the case. I am optimistic about the result. To end, I would like to note that through forward-looking higher education, the Bologna process aims to support the development of economically advanced, socially inclusive, politically democratic, and stable European societies. It is a process aiming at building a European ethos and perhaps even a European demos. These ambitions cannot be pursued effectively without public policy and institutional environments that protect academic freedom. Without academic freedom, higher education suffocates. It is time to stop neglecting this important concept, principle, and value. A major first step should be the development of a common European higher education area reference for academic freedom. Although this process may take time and many will continue to suffer until it is eventually completed, the work towards such a reference has started. This is an eminently good news. May it give us hope in a time of crisis. Thank you.